With more than 300 victims, he is the most prolific serial killer in history. Yet, he served only 14 years in prison before being released and vanishing. Who is he? Find out as we count down the 5 most prolific serial killers in history. Number 5. Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. Between 1982 and 2000, Gary Ridgway killed between 70 and 90 victims. Ridgway's first victim was a 16-year-old girl who went missing after leaving her foster home in July 1982. Her body was found a week later in the Green River. Over the next 2 years, he would rape and murder at least 40 more women, mostly prostitutes and runaways. Many of the victims would be disposed of in the Green River, giving rise to the nickname the Green River Killer. As early as 1983, Ridgway was a suspect, but police failed to find evidence linking him to the crimes. He even passed a polygraph in 1984. In 1987, a DNA sample was taken from Ridgway, but the technology to link his DNA to the victims did not yet exist. In 2001, advances in DNA testing allowed investigators to match Ridgway's DNA to semen found on the victims. He was arrested later that year. In 2003, Ridgway accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. He confessed to 48 murders, but admitted to more than 80. He claimed to have wanted to murder as many prostitutes as possible because he hated them. He was sentenced to 48 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Today, Gary Ridgway is 75 years old and serving his sentence in a high-security federal prison in Colorado. Number 4. Daniel Barbosa, the Mangrove Monster. Barbosa was a psychopathic Colombian serial killer who raped and murdered over 150 young girls during the 1970s and 1980s. He targeted poor young women and girls in search of work. He would pretend to be a foreigner who needed help delivering a large sum of money to a pastor in a church. He would offer the victims a reward for helping him. He would then lure the victims to a secluded area before raping and murdering them. On the 26th of February 1986, Barbosa was arrested just minutes after he murdered a 9-year-old girl named Elizabeth. 2 policemen approached him after they saw him acting suspiciously and found him carrying a bag, Elizabeth's bloody clothing, and severed clitoris. Barbosa was convicted in 1989 and sentenced to 16 years in prison, the maximum sentence available in Ecuador at the time. In 1994, when he was 64 years old, he was murdered in prison by the cousin of one of his victims. Number 3. Luis GARAVITO. Known as the Beast of Troublin, he was a Colombian-born serial killer convicted of murdering 189 boys in the 1990s. GARAVITO truly was a beast. Even before committing the first of his known 189 murders in 1992, he had already raped and tortured at least 200 minors between the age of 6 and 16 during the 1980s. In 1997, the discovery of a graveyard containing the bodies of 36 boys led to a nationwide manhunt for the beast. GARAVITO targeted poor and homeless boys, whose disappearance often went unnoticed. He would lure the children with gifts and money, and then offer them alcohol. After luring the victims to a secluded spot, he would tie them up, rape and torture them. His young victims were subjected to prolonged torture and abuse. GARAVITO was exceptionally cruel to his victims, subjecting them not only to violent sodomy, but also brutal torture that included cutting off the genitals of his still living victims. Finally captured in 1999, GARAVITO was sentenced to 1,853 years and 9 days in prison, the longest sentence in Colombian history. However, Colombian law limits imprisonment to 40 years, and because GARAVITO helped police find the victims' bodies, his sentence was further reduced to 22 years. In 2021, the judge blocked a request to release him on early parole for good behavior, and the beast, suffering from eye cancer and leukemia, died on the 12th of October 2023 at the age of 66. Number 2. Harold Shipman, Dr. Death. Between 1971 and 1998, British Dr. Harold Shipman murdered 250 of his own patients. As a child, Shipman had witnessed his mother dying of lung cancer and saw how doctors used morphine to ease her pain. His mother's death clearly played a role in his psychosis, as Shipman would choose morphine as his weapon. The doctor preyed on middle-aged women, injecting his victims with a lethal dose of the painkiller diamorphine and then watching them die. As their registered doctor, Shipman would then sign the death certificate of his own victims, declaring the deaths to be from natural causes. Despite the high number of healthy patients that died under his watch, Shipman escaped the law for almost 30 years, until his attempt to forge the will of one of his victims led to the family raising questions about the doctor. The investigation that followed revealed Shipman to be one of the most prolific serial killers in history, with around 250 victims. What makes Shipman particularly evil is the fact that he abused the trust people placed in him as a doctor to prey on his victims. In 2004, Harold Shipman took his own life by hanging in his prison cell. Number 1. Pedro Lopez. Aptly named the Monster of the Andes, Pedro Lopez might well be the most prolific serial killer in history. This truly evil man targeted young girls between the age of 8 and 12 and is estimated to have taken the lives of over 300 victims. Born in Colombia in 1948, Lopez was the son of a sex worker who chased him out of the house when he was only 8 years old, after she caught him attempting to molest his own sister. Lopez then lived on the streets of Colombia, where he was frequently abused. He was eventually adopted by an American family, but ran away after being molested by a teacher. In 1969, Lopez was arrested for car theft, but while incarcerated, he was gang raped by 3 other inmates. Lopez later murdered his attackers, and after his release from prison, embarked on a rampage of rape and murder throughout Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. He targeted young girls, mostly street children. He would lure the children away by offering them gifts, before raping them and strangling them with his bare hands. In 1980, Lopez was arrested in Ecuador and convicted of 3 counts of murder. He was given the maximum sentence available in Ecuador at the time, 16 years. When asked why he had committed his crimes, Lopez said it was for revenge. He claimed that his innocence had been stolen when he was 8, and so he decided to do the same to as many girls as possible. Lopez was released after serving 14 years and deported back to Colombia. There he spent a few years in a mental institution, but was again released in 1998. After that, he vanished. In 2002, a new warrant was issued for his arrest in connection with a murder that resembled his MO, and he was again named as a suspect in a murder in 2012, although he has never been caught. Today, he would be 75 years old, but it is unlikely that he stopped killing, and it is unknown how many victims he has claimed since 1998.